Hello, Tom.
Hey, Tim.
Hello, Marissa.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, guys.
Katie.
Hi.
Hey. All right. Let's hope we get a quorum here. I just heard from Cassie, and she just got off a work call, so she was going to try and make it, but she's not available at this exact moment. And we just need one more person for a quorum.
Shall I clone myself, Katie?
That'd be awesome. Oh, there we go. Hey, Amy. All right. Give us one more minute and I'll call us to order. Oh, Amy, you've got a cougar or a desert cat in your back.
Indeed, that was in my friend's front yard.
That's awesome.
Isn't that amazing? Look at that thing. It's so beautiful.
Where's your friend's front yard?
Tucson.
Ah,
So she has javelina pigs too. They come wandering through and they're like this wide and this round and
Oh
they
my God.
smell horrible. They're like flat pigs
and they're wild.
and
They're
they're
like-
wild. And they come, but their little babies are only about this big and they snort, and they're flat too. I can't believe they have where they have a stomach or a lung, you know.
It's funny. All right. So let's see. We've got Cassie who's missing. We've got Jen Carpenter and we've got Julia Gleason. Lauren is not in town right now. So when I set up this meeting time, I knew that she was not going to make it. But we do have a quorum. So I'm going to call to order the Master Plan Implementation Committee at 7:04 p.m. Present Katie Dugan.
Present Tim Davis.
President Marissa Manley.
Perfect. Thank you, Marissa and Amy. Okay. And hopefully Julia or Jen can join us. Cassie is, as I said earlier, rushing from one thing to the next, so she may make it a bit later in the evening. I do have a hard stop at 8:15 tonight, but I think I think our agenda allows us to get through everything. So first order of business is minutes. And I sent out two sets just a little bit ago, one for September 13th, which I was tardy in writing up, and a second from October 18th, which was our last meeting. So I'd love to, I think I'm going to do them separately because Marissa, you weren't at the September 13th, so you can't vote on that one. So I'm gonna make a motion to first approve the minutes from September 13th, 2021. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye, Katie Dugan.
Hi, Tim Davis.
Hi, Amy Glassmeyer.
Thank you. And second set is from our meeting on October 18th, 2021. I make a motion to approve the minutes from October 18th, 2021. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye, Katie Dugan.
Hi, Tim Davis.
Hi, Amy Glassmeyer.
Hi, Marissa Manley.
Thank you, guys. Administratively, it's good to have these up to date and with the clerk. So our first agenda item for tonight was to talk about the climate resiliency survey. And just a quick, just kind of backtrack on climate resiliency adaptation. So this is an issue that we raised in the annual update to the select board and the planning board back in July and early August. It was part of our year 2+ goals to try and get on the radar screen for the community, but also for the boards, the need to begin to work towards some of the resiliency and adaptation goals in both the harbor plan, which is where we drew a lot of our inspiration for the recommendations we made this summer, but also from the master plan. So I thought I'd just share what we put in our master plan recommendations just to start off the evening. And then I thought I would share what's in the actual master plan, and then we can take a look at the survey. So what's happening right now is the town is slowly beginning to build steam as it relates to putting some resources, committee talent behind climate resiliency and adaptation. And I know, Tim, you and Amy have both been sort of sounding the call to make this a more urgent matter. And it's certainly something that's in the master plan itself. So let me bring up what we put in the select board presentation. Okay. So this was our presentation from July to the select board. Get to the back here if you don't have vertigo. Okay. Let's zoom out a little bit. So we had 5 new goals, and the third goal that we had was around climate adaptation and sea level rise, basically highlighting that our town is particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change and sea level given our coastal location. And the specific requests were as follows. Under climate adaptation and sea level rise, we specifically emphasized the need for a seawall inventory and analysis, a Cohasset specific sea level rise analysis, and then the need to build collaboration and working groups, both within our town, but also across borders, potentially with Scituate, to begin to address climate adaptation and sea level rise. So that's what we had at a high level in the presentation that we gave in July, flagging that as one of the next sets of priorities. Then the other thing that I brought up today was just a reminder to myself around what is actually in the master plan itself. See if I can call this up and find where I hit it on my. Of course I can't. Hold on one sec. There we go. Oh no. Can't call it up. I might go at this another way. Sorry, guys. Let's see. Go. Share the master plan. And I'm going to try and get us to page 170, which is maybe why most people don't realize that there is stuff in the master plan because they didn't read all the way to page 170. So
I have the same discussion at dinner all the time now. I can't tell you. Tom's going, well, why wasn't it? Why wasn't it? And I go, you just didn't read far enough, dear.
I think it's funny. Amy, I don't know, like if I was a professor, I think I would, I think I'd test from the back of the text forward. Maybe I'm just mean that way. I don't know. Okay. So this was in the climate, what is our chapter called? Energy and sustainability chapter. And there were 3 goals. Goal number 1 is around municipal energy use, which really tied into a lot of the work that AEC has been doing over the last couple of years and continues to do in terms of reducing our overall energy consumption, but also making it more green. Goal number 2 was about taking that further outside of just town initiatives into residential and commercial use. And then goal number 3 was about climate change and the town's overall resiliency. And then goal number 4 was around promoting renewable energy and reducing emissions costs, sort of tying in a little bit to the solar work that the AEC was doing. Goal number 3, as I said, is all about climate change and town resiliency. And honestly, outside of strategy number 3.1, which is doing the state's municipal vulnerability preparedness program, which the town actually did complete. The town really hasn't moved beyond this. And there isn't per se a home for climate adaptation and resiliency in one particular place. It's obviously important, very important to the Harbor and Harbor Committee and CHIP. It's also important to AEC. It's in the master plan, but there isn't necessarily a working group or a group that is sort of coalesced around these goals yet. And I think where the town is headed is gauging interests across multiple committees and then perhaps putting in place some sort of task force or some sort of overarching committee that's going to help drive these initiatives. So the overarching goal was goal 3. 3.1 was the municipal vulnerability preparedness program. 3.2, Tim, this basically touches on exactly what was, I think, in the Harbor Plan in terms of resiliency and climate adaptation. There was discussion of the hazard mitigation plan and also the interrelationship between the edge of the harbor and the remainder of Cohasset in terms of the sea level rise and increased precipitation events. And then strategy number 3.3 actually gets into a lot of the meat that I've heard your committee, Tim, talk about, but also Chip talk about, which is conducting, under 3.3, the first bullet point is conduct breakwater studies, which is obviously key to what Chip is working on. There was a goal of identifying grants and design and construction for design and construction of improvements. Another goal was evaluate and repair seawalls. The fourth goal was around evaluating the health of the soft infrastructure, such as the ill grass beds and the salt marshes and Bassings Beach. And then the fifth was around adopting regulatory change. And this really goes to some of the stuff that, Amy, you've been talking about, which is trying to think about how we might affect zoning, particularly in our vulnerable areas in the harbor or elsewhere in town, to make sure that when we're constructing for the future, we're doing it in a manner that actually make sure that it's sustainable. So that's what's in the master plan itself. And then the last one is engage and educate the community around energy and climate issues. So that's what's in the master plan. Tim, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else here that you can think of that comes from the harbor plan that's not already articulated here. Because when I read, I didn't go back and compare master plan and harbor plan when it came to climate adaptation, but I thought 3.3 was a pretty good reflection of what I've heard you say.
I think it is. First of all, let me first say that I am not a process guy. I am an action guy. So forgive me if I sometimes try to avoid the whole process of getting to an action and to a result. So, and I've been called on that. I'm guilty as charged, but all my life, that is the way I've lived it. And so I will deal with the process as I have to, and as it makes good sense in getting to the end result, which is, in this case, protecting the entire Cohasset community, not just the harbor, but the community at large. That said, you may have seen the letter that I wrote to the select board after I met with Chris Senior, and he told me the select board had no political interest in sea level rise and resiliency in the harbor. Since that memo went out, there has been, it seems to me, a lot more interest in addressing the issues of sea level rise and climate change, and storm surge, particularly as it comes to Cohasset Harbor. So there are a number of initiatives that are going on. First and foremost, half of Cohasset Harbor is in Scituate. Our new town council has been charged with reviewing, first of all, a number of ancient laws that give Cohasset some jurisdiction over the Scituate part of Cohasset Harbor. And she is scheduled to meet with me, I think, sometime in this calendar year, I hope. Originally, it was going to be in July, and then was postponed to September, and now there's a town meeting, and so it goes on and on. But anyway, the idea is to try and get jurisdiction for Cohasset of as much of Cohasset Harbor as we can, to allow us then to proceed with doing the engineering of the breakwater and the seawalls, and to be able to, on our own, apply for grants that will help us address those. The second thing that is happening is that the Harbor Committee has charged it's not really even a working group, but it's a group that are made up of Harbor Committee members and others to have a harbor climate change and resiliency summit. We are meeting on Thursday with Chris Senior and others to try to formulate what the agenda would be, what we need to have, who the speakers would be. We have some experts in our community. Tom Bell, who Amy may know, certainly is one that's going to play an integral part of this. And he's been great in offering his expertise. Jack Buckley of CSCR is really interested in working with us, particularly on the natural barriers, like Pleasant Beach and the eelgrass and so forth.
Yeah, it's that soft infrastructure. Yeah.
So all of this is coming together. I think there are some that would like to kick this down the road to Earth Day next spring. I am not one to kick it down the road, but we're going to continue to focus on this. George Baumgartner is heading the charge. Lisa Hewitt has agreed to help him. And we're going to move this forward, maybe kicking and screaming, but we're going to move it forward and hopefully bring the community together to at least discuss what has to happen and understand the vulnerability for the rest of the community. I think very few people really understand what could happen, even had the last nor'easter storm that we had happened at high tide, or even, God forbid, an astronomically high tide instead of a -1.5 high tide. It would have been a disaster for certainly for the harbor and probably for greater parts of the community. So anyway, that's all underway, and happy to have any advice and counsel on process, as that is not my my forte. So.
Yeah. Amy, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, one thing that we did not put in the master plan, I think, in as strong a language as we should now that we know that more about what the likelihood of climate variation is going to look like, is a discussion of the location of our critical infrastructure. So all we have to do is have a storm surge that comes up over the seawall and up the brook, and we've taken out our sewage treatment plant and we've taken out our water supply. So it is something that is unusual in as much as a lot of the time that's not how places are configured with such critical infrastructure so close to one another. But I think we really need to focus on that, because that would stop everything. Literally, it would stop everything, and salt water in both of them would cause a complete shutdown of the systems, and it would take weeks to clean them out and actually get them operating again. In conjunction with that is that the water is going to go up Elm Street, and it's going to close off access to the fire department and the police department. So we really have to have a much more worried sense of concern than we might have, because of the ways in which the town has been built. And so, I think that many of us thought, oh, we have to really worry about the downtown. We really have to worry about the water supply and the sewage and the cop shop, because the cop shop will be inundated, and it will be impossible to pass and come down to the harbor to do any sort of rescue or any sort of, important action that would be required by a significant surge.
So I think you're right, Amy. I mean, there's talk of climate in the public facilities and services, but it's not directly related to those kind of critical infrastructures. On the water supply, I've heard sewer, obviously, just given the location of that plant, and obviously police and fire. The water supply, given that the plant is off of Pond Street, I didn't quite follow how that was going to travel from the harbor all the way back to where our water comes from off a pond.
I believe there's a well up there that Amy is referring to.
It's really a topography problem, and Tom can shoot you a map to show you what sticks up with a storm surge of Sandy and what doesn't stick up.
Okay.
And so it's a well issue.
It's a well issue. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Tom
it's not.
Tom does have some great graphics that would
Okay.
really help with this conversation.
Okay. No, that's fine. I don't doubt Tom's analysis. I hadn't heard the water supply issue, but it's not creeping all the way back to the plant. It's
To the well.
to the well. I got it. That makes more sense to me. Okay. Let me just quickly look at the group. So as Tim said, from a process standpoint, where I think the town is at is, we are, and by the town, I mean the select board, the planning department and Chris Senior. I think they're targeting to have this first kind of climate summit meeting. And they're trying to figure out how to shape that, who needs to be involved, what the issues are from the various committees. And I haven't heard a date, Tim, yet around Earth Day or otherwise. I would hope that it would happen sometime in early 2022, but because Earth Day seems awfully far off.
Well, that's the date that has been suggested to me. Is
Okay.
that do it around Earth Day. Well, and I can't accept that. So the harbor initiative will not be waiting for Earth Day. I can tell you that. The other thing I can say is that the Harbor Committee and the initiative that we are supporting is totally willing and anxious to get the rest of the town involved. So to the extent MPIC wants to be involved, if there are groups that want to be involved, we certainly will do it. I'm meeting with, as I say, I'm meeting with Chris Senior on Thursday. I'm meeting tomorrow with George Baumgartner, who is heading this up. We will create an umbrella for the entire community to the extent the community wants to be involved. The one thing I don't want to do is say, okay, we've got town meeting, then we've got Thanksgiving, and then we've got Christmas, and then we've got the New Year's, and then, guess what? Then there's summer. I'm not built that way, so I'm not going to do that.
No, I hear that you're not built that way. I also, I think part of it, Tim, is just town hall resources to staff and help community members. And so I think that's just another rate limiter that I see from my side.
And I'm sure you're right, Katie, and I don't want to call on a lot of the town hall resources. We can do this without town hall resources if necessary. So we'll soldier on, push ahead. We'll get the various constituents that are interested. We'll get an agenda put together. We'll find experts in the community that will work with us. And then when we're ready to go public with it, we'll include town hall and everybody else. That'll be wonderful.
Okay.
Be a kumbaya moment.
It feels a little rogue for my taste, Tim, but I trust
It
that you will collaborate.
Of course.
Because I do think there are folks that are willing to partner. It's just it's connecting with them.
Yeah.
So Marissa, I wanted to ask you, have you guys at Open Space and Rec had any conversations recently around climate resiliency, just to kind of loop in?
We've not. Yeah, the only thing we've really talked about is Earth Day, but it's more in the planning capacity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps you can bring some of this conversation back,
Yep.
Peter and the group. And I didn't check, but this email or this memo went out to all the chairs of, I don't know how many committees, but lots of committees. And it was from Brianna Bennett, who is the new halftime resource that's working with Lauren Lind, who's supporting AEC, Harbor, and CHIP. And one of the things that she's been tasked with is helping bring together this climate, this global climate resiliency conversation in town. And so the first step that she sent out was this memo asking all of the individual committees to participate and complete a survey. So that's one of the things I want to do tonight, was look at that survey and just come up with a response from Master Plan Implementation Committee. Tim, I assume that Harbor and CHIP are filling this out separately?
I assume so. I filled it out. I don't know if I haven't tracked the rest of the committee, but I will follow up with them.
It's one submission per committee.
Oh, okay. Well, I submitted for both then.
Okay. Yeah, so it says that the committee chairs and department heads should submit their respective committee and department survey responses. So Marissa, this might be one thing that Peter wants to either do on behalf of the Open Space and Rec, or at least make them aware. The deadline is tomorrow, but I'm sure that's.
Yeah, it was a similar conversation in our meeting last week. He had already submitted it. So we didn't discuss it. He just said to submit our own version of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
You guys submitted your own version of it?
I did not. I think one other committee member had as well.
Okay. I think poor Brianna is going to pull her hair out a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, no, I know.
We're not following her instructions. I think she was trying to get
Yes.
committee by committee to consolidate their views. Amy, are you going to do something or discuss this at planning board?
So we haven't had a chance to talk about this. And I did raise it with Lauren because this next week we have a very short meeting. We really only have 8:08 Chief Justice.
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch of stuff after that that will take significant amount of time. First off, she thought that if we had nothing to get into on this week, but that she felt the next week was really going to be jam-packed, so that if we had an easy week this week, it would be better for everybody. Because I raised the question of should we be talking about climate at this point? As a result, we didn't take a position on that.
Okay. All right.
And I think it's human resource related in town, right? I mean, she's balancing a lot of things, and adding one more to her plate that she felt she had to do, I don't think she could handle it.
Well, I guess my question for you is Amy, is I know Lauren's intent is to try and balance the agenda for the planning board, but it seems like the planning board should have input, and even if it's delayed, in terms of what your response is. I'll share the survey itself. It's really not that complicated. It literally is your email, the committee or the department they're representing. And then, what, if any, actions has your committee or department already created, funded, or participated in? What are future projects? Would your committee be interested in participating in a climate summit? What would your committee want to discuss at the climate summit? And then additional comments. My intent was to try and get some input from the committee today around what we wanted to say from Master Plan Implementation Committee. My thought was that we would stick close to what goal 3.3 was saying in terms of what we think should be focused on, which is really the breakwater studies, evaluating our seawalls, soft infrastructure, and then regulatory change as sort of the 4 topics that we would want to talk at the summit about. But I'm happy to add anything else that people think is important, because again, I viewed this as a survey that was coming from the full committee, so I didn't want to submit anything until I had heard the opinions of the master plan.
So, if we approach this from the constraints that we have as the planning board regarding what we are responsible for, to date, I have not seen any long-range planning thinking in our efforts. And that is not because there isn't any thinking going on, it's going on in other places. For example, in the zoning bylaw working group. So that if you think about it, that is a planning function, but it's being done by a multi-topic committee. And so that absorbs a portion of what we might be concerned about. If, as a planner, what we'd be concerned about, of course, is everything. And in particular, the questions of the infrastructure and the critical infrastructure as it relates to fire, water, sewer, police. But again, those latter ones are really not our purview. We don't actually touch on that. And so, other than having personal interests in it and wanting to be a part of it for that reason, it's a little bit hard to figure out what our leverage is. I wouldn't mind if Tom wants to weigh in and see what he has to say.
You're referring to Tom Callahan?
Correct.
I'm just here on observer status. I don't have anything to add, but I think
Okay.
there are a couple of parts of the zoning bylaw that touch upon alternative energy and climate resilience, at least for the harbor zoning. So, I think it's appropriate for our board to weigh in. I'm sure we have some opinions, even though we don't maybe necessarily have a great official role. But there's some parts of the bylaw that we have to deal with this stuff. So I think it's appropriate.
Right. The issue is whether or not we have to sort that out. We haven't, and we just simply haven't done it.
Yeah.
All
I
right,
guess
well,
my only devil's advocate, Amy, is that if the planning board wants a seat at the table, now is the time to raise your hand. And maybe that's the simple conversation to have on Wednesday is if the planning board wants to have a seat at the table, somebody needs to fill out the survey and say, we want a seat at the table.
And that's okay. I mean, again, I tried to raise it and it just didn't fit in where we were, but I can definitely do it in that last 48 hours, nothing previously mentioned, and see what kind of perspective I get. At least it will be an interesting conversation about what people are thinking.
Send me the survey, Katie, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll send you a survey, Tom.
Thank you. All right, going back to observer status.
Okay.
I just have one other thought around, I think it was in one of the initial goals that you had read specific to sea level rise analysis.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I would think that would be a fairly important exercise to undergo. Also thinking about, I don't even know if in town there would be climate refugees and what that would mean for the town from a financial standpoint. So I know that Hull, for example, I think like 50% of their properties after sea level rise evaluation will be underwater in 25 to 50 years. So they're in the process of now defining more of like a buyback program for those properties so that there's not a significant impact to property value, and those property owners have some mechanism for getting out of that. And I don't know, certainly a lot of properties in town are on rocks and ledge, and so maybe it's not as much of a problem for us, but as part of that analysis, it might be worth understanding that before coming up with.
About $140 million worth of real estate is at risk.
Yeah.
Right, just downtown, without looking any further than just from the harbor straight up Elm Street and up the brook.
And I think that's probably a low estimate. The first thing, let me say, Katie, you referred to what the efforts of the Harbor Committee and what we're doing with the Climate Summit as rogue. It's not rogue. So I just want to object to that on the record. It is, we are following the harbor plan. We are addressing the issues of climate change and harbor resiliency according to the harbor plan and also the master plan itself. So we're going to push forward. The only thing that may be different in process is that we're not going to wait till Earth Day. That's my only point.
Okay.
We're going to continue to push forward. The second thing is, you're absolutely right. There is 40 or $50 million of property that's at risk. Jacobs Meadow historically has been a buffer to this kind of storm surge that would otherwise flood a lot of the rest of Cohasset. Jacobs Meadow now has private property around it. And one of the things that could be done is that we could look at acquiring that property over time and returning Jacobs Meadow into a natural buffer to storm surge and the damage for the rest of the town. That's just a thought, something that I think is reasonable to consider. But there are a number of other issues as well. So we'll go on. We'll soldier on and see where we get. Hopefully before Earth Day.
Okay. So Tim, I didn't mean to mischaracterize, but I also.
That's okay. That's okay.
I also want to recognize that you're it's not a Harbor and Chip versus the town or the rest of
No.
of the committees. I guess what I'm encouraging you to think is if there's a way to incorporate more support.
Katie, I've been trying to do that for months and have met with resistance, as you are well aware. Now, I think we're finally getting to the point where there is a cooperative environment. And certainly I have asked Lauren Lind and Brianna Bennett to make sure that anything we are doing in the harbor does not conflict with anything that's being done throughout the rest of the town. And we really do want to collaborate and cooperate, just as we want to do with Situate, our good neighbors to the south, which we will do. So there we are.
Marissa, I just want to circle back to your comment. So if I understood you correctly, what your observation about strategy 3.3 is it really jumps into kind of the details around the breakwater, the seawall, the soft infrastructure, regulatory change without sort of setting the bigger picture, as it were, as to like what a 100-year storm 25 years out could look like in terms of the impact to the town. And we're almost like trying to solve the issues without sort of laying the framework out first around how big is this issue, how many climate refugees we're going to have, what is the scope of town that's going to be impacted.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summarization.
Okay. All right. I like that observation. And Amy, I liked your observation also that the critical infrastructure risk isn't something that comes up in the master plan. So when I script our response back from Master Plan Implementation Committee, I'm going to stick to 3.3 in terms of the content, in terms of what we want to discuss, but I'll add in, Marissa, your comment about the bigger picture impact of how this is going to impact real estate and commercial, residential commercial real estate. And then Amy, I'll add in your comment about sort of the critical infrastructure risk that hasn't been really emphasized. And other than that, if there's, Marissa, I know you've expressed an interest in participating in climate adaptation and resiliency. Tim has already been leading the charge on that. Amy, depending on what the planning board says or doesn't say about their interest in participating in this, if you have a personal interest that you want to express through Master Plan Implementation Committee, I would love to have you have a seat at the table. I personally am feeling like my plate is awfully full right now to take up another big picture issue with zoning and a bunch of other stuff happening. So I'm going to leave, Marissa, I'm going to leave it with you, and Amy, I'm going to leave it with you as this climate summit gets closer being planned. If you guys are interested in being representatives for Master Plan Implementation Committee, I would love to have somebody step up besides Katie Dugan on this one. So
I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also interested as well, whether from open spaces or this. And I think Brianna, I've connected with her before on it too. So I think she knows that
Okay.
something I'm passionate about. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, first step is filling out the survey, but I wanted just to share it with the whole group. It sounds like a bunch of you are already aware of it. But I didn't want to fill it out without sort of just having the conversation to see what people thought were the important issues. And again, it's pretty high level, but it's more just sort of registering interest from each of the different committees on what the topics are and what perspective you're taking as it relates to this. So that was the climate resiliency survey conversation. The next topic on the agenda was actually special town meeting. And I just wanted to share with everybody just a couple things from the warrant so that we were all in lockstep as it relates to how the warrant is actually going to impact some of the master plan work. So I shared with everybody an advanced copy of what will be in your mailbox soon. I think they're going out, I think they went to print on Friday. So the warrant should be in your inboxes probably right after Thanksgiving, because we need to have it 2 weeks before town meeting. So if you haven't marked your calendar already, special town meeting is Monday, December 13th at 7 o'clock. It's going to be in person at the gym. So we are venturing back to a more normal format. In terms of the things that we need to be aware of as a committee, I'm just going to get to the first article. Tim, there's our OPEB.
Oh, good.
They're 350,000. That's what we wanted.
That's what we wanted. They're on track.
Exactly. So so the first couple articles are all about transfers to stabilizations funds, which is kind of the typical financial cleanup that we do at special town meeting to allocate free cash flow. So for those of you that aren't aware, what happens at year end is that obviously the books of the town are closed. The operating budget is sort of either spent or not spent. And the town looks at how its overall sources and uses were for the year end. There's generally, there's the sources that come in from unspent department funds, and then there's sources that come in from also revenue areas that came in higher than expected. So an example of that is when we budget new growth as in our tax levy at the top of our operating statement, the new growth often is forecasted at 425,000. In years past, we've been showing new growth numbers of, 625,000. And as a result, that would result in $200,000 free cash flow. So at year end, we know what our free cash flow number is. It's called undesignated fund balance. I think this year our undesignated fund balance was a little over $1 million, which is a bit lower than where it's been running between $1 million and $1.5 million. Some years we even tip north of 2 million, but that's generally a one-off scenario. So special town meeting allocates a portion or a good portion of that free cash flow or undesignated fund balance back into either one-time costs or stabilization funds, because that's the only two places they can go. So the stabilization costs were dealt with in Articles 2 and 3. And now we get to Article 4, which is allocation to one-time costs. And this is what gets interesting for us. So the first project is Town Hall, which is receiving $750,000 of funds to continue the new town hall, hopefully project to fruition. Second is $250,000 to fund the school facility study, which is really funding for the school facilities, or I think it's called School Facilities Committee, that has just begun work to look at what improvements we need to make to all three school buildings, including potentially looking at a new middle high school building, which is likely going to be a difficult road to hoe. The third one is directly a result of Master Plan Implementation Committee, which is the request for consulting services to continue the zoning bylaw working group's work and the comprehensive zoning redraft and reorganization. And then we have some less interesting ones that I don't even really know the details on: cemetery records update and new voting booths. I always support new voting technology. Cemetery records upgrade just doesn't sound that interesting, but obviously is only $18,000. So this is, I just wanted people to be aware that there are kind of, number three, the consulting services is obviously critical from a master plan perspective. The school facility study, I would also, both 1 and 2 sort of fall under the public facilities and services and are part of longer term projects that the town has going on. Town Hall, which is our 4th try, and school facilities, which is a brand new initiative as of this year. So that's the allocation of one-time costs there. And then capital improvements. Sometimes capital projects have some more exciting stuff. This is actually not that exciting. I think the only thing I would note is that the Elm Street water main replacement, that is tied to the overall Elm Street corridor project. And the fact that part of the reason that we chose to emphasize the Elm Street corridor redesign in our year 1 initiatives was that we knew that there needed to be water main replacement and sewer work done in Elm Street. So it only made sense to incorporate that into a broader redesign of the corridor, knowing that we were going to do that infrastructure work plus the CHI Cohasset Harbor Inn project was going to kick off. And if I remember correctly, I think Lauren mentioned that one of the water mains that's being replaced is actually from like 1880s. So it's probably overdue on Elm Street. And then we get to Articles 6 and 7, which are 2 articles in terms of changes to zoning that the zoning bylaw working group proposed, and it went through public hearings with the planning board and then had votes with the ZBA, select board, and advisory. Article 6 is around changes to residential zoning definitions. There's changes to 4 existing definitions, and then there's addition of 6 new definitions. And the rationale behind the zoning bylaw working group's recommendation was that there is some foundational work that has to happen with our definitions now in order to bring our definitions more into compliance with state law, both statutory law, but also in many cases, case law that has evolved since we've last looked at definitions, which is as far back as 1989. So we felt very strongly from a working group perspective that making these definitional changes now would allow our building inspector, our planning board, and our ZBA to have a better definitional foundation when they were making decisions and as it relates to buildable lots and a critical issue, a land use issue around residential access. So this article is just a definitional change, as I said, 4 existing and 6 new, and the votes on that were 5-0 from select board, 6-1 from advisory, 4-1 from planning, and 5-0 from the zoning board of appeals. The next article is around ledge protection, and this is a follow-up from spring town meeting where the zoning bylaw working group had actually asked to change Article 11, which was rules and regulations governing earth removal, and broaden it to make it Article 11, land alteration. In the spring, we added protection for clearing activities. And we were asked by the community to consider adding ledge protection. We chose not to do that at Springtown meeting, but we have brought forward a proposal for ledge protection at special town meeting. This protects ledge that is exposed ledge only. So it's not ledge that you would uncover if you were doing a development project in underground. But again, it is really trying to protect the community character and the topographical uniqueness of Cohasset, where we do have those rocky outcroppings. And so what we've done is add in protections and a special permit process here in B that protects exposed ledge when it apply through a special permit process for only ledge removal associated with structures or accessory buildings. So we are not restricting the removal of exposed ledge for homes or anything that's the principal building, such as a garage or sewer systems, but really trying to make that land use policy decision that there should be some restrictions. And so examples of it, what an accessory structure or building in terms of exposed ledge removal would be fences or sheds, barns, patios, athletic courts, and pools. So this ledge removal proposal, again, went through the same public hearing process and actually had unanimous votes from all of the boards. So those are the two zoning articles that are being brought forth by the zoning bylaw working group. In terms of other stuff in here that relates to master plan initiatives, there were a couple easement issues, which I haven't delved in quite a bit. Tim, you may know more about the easement exchange to allow for the work being done at the Parker Avenue boat ramp. And then there's also, I think that's it. That's the only other one that's in there. And again, the Parker boat ramp improvements are something that's been in the harbor plan in terms of an infrastructure improvement that the town needs.
And that was really a very easy swap between Paul Trendowitz, who owns the marina, and the town. So it was in his best interest and the town's best interest. So there was no controversy over that at all.
Yeah, it looks like they've got unanimous votes, which is always helpful in terms of indications. And then interestingly, the only other thing I noted is that they actually changed the format of the article. Usually we have the informational summaries associated with the articles right below each of the articles, but this year, for whatever reason, they've moved the informational summaries to the appendix. So Appendix A is actually the informational summary, which explains the zoning working group's proposal related to changes in definitions. Appendix B is the rationale for the zoning working group's proposal around ledge protection. And then this is the easement drawing that is being referred to in the Parker Ave boat ramp. So if anybody is asking where the informational summaries are, apparently they're in the back this year for some reason. So that's it from a master plan implementation committee perspective. We've got a couple things that we care about in the special town meeting warrant. For those of you that haven't attended special town meeting, it is lightly attended. So it is super helpful if members from our committee can be there, because it sometimes can be tricky to get a quorum. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to mark your calendar to be there. Any questions on special town meeting? The other thing, there were two other things I just wanted to talk about. One is Elm Street Working Group is having their final public forum. This was scheduled for the Storm Week and has been rescheduled for this Thursday at 7 o'clock. It's a Zoom public forum. I had circulated previously to the implementation committee the final report that Watson and Sampson had written up based on all the public forums and the work with the working group. It includes in that final report the final design proposals. So the intent of, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but the intent of this Thursday's public forum is to reveal to the community the final design proposal for the corridor and the intersection. Is that correct?
It is, although I would not say final design. We do know that there are some neighbors that have objections to the current design. So would like to air them, and nothing is final until it's final. So let's, we want the public to see it, to weigh in, add their comments, objections, suggestions, whatever there may be, and then we will then move hopefully to a final design.
Gotcha. So final draft design.
Oh, there we go. Final draft works.
Okay, all right. And, you know, unfortunately, I cannot attend this Thursday. My daughter, her school is having their first live drama production, and she runs the light board. So I'm going to be at the Newsies musical on Thursday night. I was hoping that some members of the Master Plan Implementation Committee might be able to go and represent on Thursday night if possible. Tim, are you going to be able to make it?
I plan to be there, yes.
Okay, that's awesome. And again, Amy, Cassie, Marissa, Julia, if anybody else is able to attend the public forum, this is kind of the forever hold your peace meeting in my mind. So
It is.
and you know, I was really impressed with the final report written by Watson and Sampson. I thought it did a nice job of kind of summarizing all the work that went into this and all the work the working group has done. It's a big file, so a lot of times when I've circulated, I've gotten bounce backs. But if you go to the master plan if you go to the town website and go to our page for master plan implementation committee, there's actually a link to the final study there. It's worth taking a look at if you have a little bit of time, just to kind of familiarize yourself with the process, but also with the final design. Is there anything else, Tim, that we should be aware of as it relates to the corridor?
No, I think except for the fact that there's at least one neighbor that is concerned about the intersection by the Cohasset Harbor Inn and how that's configured. Now, I do
Okay.
know that Lauren and Jason Federico and the Wasson have been looking at that and seeing if there's a way to mitigate the issues. So I haven't seen anything that's come out of that, but hopefully it'll be enough to at least keep the neighbors reasonably happy.
Yeah.
I think other than that, I think, you know, the things that we've really been working hard to preserve are the view corridor to the harbor, the intersection itself and the design of it, the Captain's Well is, you know, trying to make that a historic site and a little bit more visible to everybody. So I think there are a lot of good things that are in that that final draft.
Okay.
We'll see.
Julia, I know that you've been recovering.
Yeah.
But I see that you're able to mobilize a little bit better there.
Yeah, I'll go to that meeting Thursday too, so.
That'd be awesome. And I know that that Lauren had reached out to you directly about the Captain's Well. I don't know if you or Jackie or anybody else from the Historic Commission has been able to weigh in specifically in the proposal that's going before the public on Thursday.
No, we didn't discuss it at the last meeting.
Okay. If you don't mind getting the word out to the Historic Commission members.
I certainly can, yeah.
In an email, making sure that they're aware
Sure.
that this Thursday is kind of an important meeting talking about the corridor and you know, how the Captain's Well is going to be incorporated into that new intersection design. I think that would be really helpful
Yeah.
to make sure they're up to speed on that. In terms of funding, you know, we had hoped that we were going to get the community One Stop for Growth grant, which was going to allow us to go from this kind of conceptual design through, you know, the 75% engineering designs. And the grant was for $500,000. And unfortunately, we did not receive it. We were sort of 0 for 2 in terms of the 2 grants that we submitted there.
Edie, did they, sorry to interrupt, did they give feedback on why?
You know, I haven't heard, and I will follow up with Lauren and see if she can provide some feedback. And since she isn't, I'm sure she was here tonight, she'd be able to tell us. But no, I have not heard.
I was more
all the-
curious.
Yeah.
So
know.
I know a little bit. I mean,
Okay.
basically, were inundated with proposals. And honestly, again, because we have such a shortage of staff in the main office, you can't you cannot write a winning proposal on the fly. You have to really sit and think about it very carefully and think about exactly all the things that you would not want to say because it seems superfluous that has to be said so that you float to the top. And I think that if Cohasset really wants to raise money from grant programs, we need a grant writer.
So
Well, that seems a little counterintuitive. Seems like we need money to support our staff.
I know, it totally is. But the bottom line is, I know people in other towns that have, they have a person, it's usually somebody in economic development, and they're doing nothing but writing proposals day in and day out. And there's a lingo and a form, and you just have to do it. And it's not a critique of us. It's just that we don't have the resources to go up against guns that are bigger than us.
I believe that having such a person would pay for themselves
Oh, they do.
in spades. So it's not a matter of not having the resources, it's not having the political will to get it done. That's the problem. I mean, I'm totally with you, Amy. We can do it.
And Amy, there was specific feedback given to the town that our grant proposals were not detailed enough or thoughtful.
No, it was what Lauren heard was that there were way more people than they were expecting to apply.
Okay. So it was more applicants than grant dollars was
Yeah,
the number
but-
one reason, but then your point is that in order to rise to the top, when there's that scarcity, you have to have the A+ paper instead of the B+ paper.
Yeah, it just is. And we do have a former planner from Medford who lives in town. And we haven't really ever approached her, but she had a really good track record for writing proposals. And I think she got burnt out completely, and I'm not sure she could be talked into doing it. But that's what we need. We need that one piece of human that's distinct.
Maybe she could act as a coach to somebody we'd bring in.
Well, or she might be willing to do it for a bit. It's just one of those things that we could, think about going out and asking her if she'd be interested. I spoke to her when more than a year ago when there was a house being built in front of her house. And as the planning board chair, I was talking to her about, the problems that they were identifying.
Can you share with us what her name is?
Clodagh. And let's see, what's Clodagh's last name?
CLO?
CLO. I think it's, I know it's CLO. How do you like that? That's all I know.
That's a start.
But
Whoa.
I mean, it's a classic Irish name. And her husband is a
Amy can shoot.
doctor
I
and-
know it's in Amy's email somewhere.
I'll check with Amy.
I just Googled Clodagh Stoker. All right, Economic Development Planner, City of Medford.
yeah, that was
Clodagh,
What's her last name?
Stoker, if this is the right.
Stoker.
yes, that's her husband's last name is different. Her husband's first name is Aiden. So there we go. I only get the first two.
And the dog's name?
They do have a dog, by the way, a golden retriever.
There you go. I'm guilty. I only remember the dog's name and maybe the wife's, but the husband, you're dead to me. So I have to rely on my husband.
Right, we should do some kind of pantomime, right?
Yeah, exactly. I do know that the backup plan for funding, the next stage of funding for Elm Street corridor, given that we didn't succeed in the grant, was tapping into the America Recovery Act funds that the town has access to. So that was sort of the plan B. But I haven't heard any of the details around the exact dollar amounts. I had heard from Lauren that they were considering, so you get through the design, the sort of preliminary design conceptual phase, which we're going to close out hopefully after this Thursday night's public forum. You then have your final design that then has to go through construction and engineering design phase. And there's the 25% and then there's the 75%. 75% is considered shovel ready for additional grant funding. And we had hoped that we were going to be able to go from what is just the conceptual design to the 75% all in one step. Lauren had said to me a couple weeks ago when we didn't get the grant that there had been talk about splitting this into getting to the 25 and then from the 25 to the 75 in sort of two phases to kind of go a little bit easier in terms of the funding requirements. I haven't heard back from her, or I haven't had a conversation with her about that, but I do know that they were targeting using the American Recovery Act funds to do that. I think we have something like $600,000 or $700,000 already in hand for the America Recovery Act funds. And there's like another $600,000 or $700,000 that's being held at the county level that you then have to basically apply. It's the town's money, but it's being held at the county level and you have to kind of apply for its release. So in total, we have, $1.3, $1.4 million in America Recovery Act funds that are available to our town. Half of them are already in our hands. But I haven't heard anything more besides the fact that they were going to split the engineering design into sort of the 25 and the 75 and use the American Recovery Act. Tim, have you heard anything else at the working group level in terms of how this is going to get funded?
I've not, but I do know that the Build Back America or Build America Better or whatever it is act was signed today.
Okay.
Massachusetts has $9 billion coming. So Cohasset has got to get its act together and get ready to apply for these monies. They're there. Somebody's going to get them. So we need to be ready to get them. That they sound like a broken record, but
Yeah, there's a theme going around
yeah,
grants.
there is a theme. It's been
I mean,
going-
one thing we could do is to call MAPC and have them give the boards that are relevant a lowdown on what's going on in terms of the funds. Because some of the funds are coming through EDA, the Economic Development Administration. Some of them are coming through DOT. There's a lot of different ways that money's going to go out. It's not
Yeah.
going to just be a big faucet and you turn it on and
Oh, no,
ooh,
no.
it comes
And
down
it's
into
gonna be over 10 years too. I know it's going to be a long-term thing, but
yeah, and so, but the MAPC has done some presentations. I attended a couple of them on what was going to be the kind of requirements necessary for the funding. And it would be helpful if why don't we just tap into them and have them, anybody that wants to come to that kind of discussion could show up and, we'd be better off for knowing.
Okay. Well, I'll plan on sending an email to Lauren because I've kind of got three things that the working group wanted. One was just her perspective on why we didn't get the two grants. I want her to sort of give us an update on where she believes the next round of Elm Street corridor funding is going to come from and how it's going to be phased so that once we get through this public forum on Thursday, we have a line of sight as to where our money is going to be coming from for the actual design engineering. And then Amy, I will also ask her about keeping her eye out for MAPC updates or webinars around how towns and communities can access the Build America Act funds and how those funds are going to flow out in terms of getting us access to infrastructure. Because I think the more we know, the more we can kind of plan on how to be ready. And outside of a very nice infographic that I don't know if you guys have seen it, but Peter Pescatori sent me an infographic on the funds in general. I don't know if you guys have seen any of those.
No, sounds great.
Let me see if I can bring it up. And then I'll circulate it. I was actually able to find it. So this was just a visual breakdown of the infrastructure in terms of the $9 billion. Actually, more than that. So this was just a breakdown of the categories. And so I'd be curious to get MAPC's take on kind of spending categories, but as you were saying, Amy, how the funds are actually going to be released mechanically. Because that's a big piece of it in terms of like, how do you actually access this and when do you need to be ready to access this?
Yeah, I see 3 of them that actually might relate to us. Improved water, climate, electric vehicles. I don't think reconnecting communities relates to us at all because that's about the splitting of African-American communities over history and having them be marooned. I don't think we have a really big environmental cleanup that we would be successful competing for. We don't have an airport.
Well,
We don't have a grid problem.
we have ports.
We do have a grid problem, but
Yeah, we do, but we don't control it.
I was about to say, if you have
Yeah.
we have a grid.
4 days later, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
We also have a port. Don't forget, we have a port.
Oh, oh, excellent. I have it. I guess we should, for purposes for federal spending, we're not the harbor, we're the Cohasset Port. Is that what we're calling ourselves?
Exactly. We have a port.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, I'll circulate
Roads
this.
and bridges around the harbor
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
breakwaters.
There we go.
Everybody has plenty of bad roads. That is like a universal truth in the United States.
You think that includes sidewalks?
I don't know. I mean, it's an excellent question. I mean, that's kind of like, those are kind of the details that we need to know is
An
like,
elevated sidewalk in front of the harbor so that we have a,
Amy, it's called the Captain's Walk.
there you
except
go.
for,
Go. We'll call it a
Exactly.
sidewalk for getting funding.
Exactly. And the last topic I wanted to cover tonight was just Sawyer Street Sidewalk Project. So when we last met last time, we had talked about the sidewalk plan and funding, but then we had also talked about submitting the letter of support for the Sawyer Street project, which was the new segment from Fair Oaks to 3A. The letter that we reviewed and voted on was submitted. Open Space and Rec came and actually spoke at Concom back in October. And the good news is that after a third public hearing for a stormwater permit, the Conservation Committee voted in favor of proceeding forward with the project. I think there was some important work that the Conservation Commission pushed the town to do in its design. So one of the reasons that they got comfortable with the project is that the town came forward with a second proposal, which was to use permeable sidewalk material instead of impermeable. And given the sensitivity of the area that they were working in, which is in the 50-foot buffer zone for some wetlands, it all came together. But it was a project that I honestly think that without a little bit of community input and community expression of interest from master plan and from open space and rec could have gotten shelved again. And so the good news is that that project is going to be moving forward. And as we talked about at our last meeting, it's actually a sidewalk summit that for once we already have funding sitting in our hot little hands. And so with the permitting process now, the first approvals completed with Concom, there's some DEP stuff that has to happen at a state level, given some of the tree removal, but we're in the permitting phase so that hopefully next spring you will see sidewalks going in on Sawyer Street along with the repaving of Sawyer after some of the
That's
I think it was
awesome.
water main work. So that was great news. So I felt like, although it wasn't a big lift on our part, I think that expression of support on the margin tipped the balance a little bit. So
Agreed.
kudos to us and Open Space and Rec for weighing in on that, because I do think it made a difference. And we have a new segment of sidewalk that's going to happen in town. And I know at least one community member, Paul Cleary, was super excited.
Was.
After our Tuesday meeting last week, he still thought it was a dead project. And when we told him, no, it made it through
Mhm.
Concom, he was like, oh my God, I'm going home to tell my kids they can bike to Whitney Thayer in the future. So he was super excited for that. So that was sweet to see, actually a positive, like, real-time reaction from the community. So that was kind of the last official agenda item. I was going to suggest that our next December meeting go back to kind of focusing on packaging up some of the conversations we had in October about sidewalks and getting us to the point where we could have kind of a presentation that we went to the planning board with, and we went to Open Space and Rec with, to get those two committees' feedback on both the funding plan, but also more importantly, how we think about sidewalk prioritization and the overall transportation and safety improvements that were articulated in the complete streets. And so my hope was that we could dedicate the December meeting to that conversation, if that made sense to everybody.
It's good.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other things that we do have other updates from members? Is there anything else that's on people's minds that they wanted to share tonight? Okay.
Good. I thought you had a hard stop at 8:15, Katie.
I did. I got a text from my daughter that things were running late, so I bought myself another 10 minutes.
Okay.
Her transportation is getting a oil change, so I'm now transportation for the evening. So you have a driver, and then you take their car away, and it's like, oh my God, I'm back in the driver's seat. So with that, I think I will, unless anybody else has anything, adjourn the meeting at 8:22.
All right. Thanks, Katie. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Cassie, thanks for making it.
Sorry, sorry it's late. Sorry,
Yeah,
guys.
no worries. I totally understand.
Take care, everyone.
All
Guys.
right. Thanks. All right. Bye.